Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, feeling an eerie presence in your own home? Imagine seeing a shadowy figure standing silently in the corner of your bedroom. In this video, I'll share my chilling experience with a mysterious entity that haunted my family and me, leaving us with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of fear. Do you believe in ghosts or spirits? What would you do if you saw a shadow that seemed to watch your every move? Join me as I recount the terrifying nights and the shared encounters that changed how we viewed our once safe and cozy home. Stay with me to uncover the unsettling truth about the shadowy figure and how these experiences impacted our sense of security forever. Are you ready to face the unknown? Let's dive in. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I shared a big bedroom with my siblings and parents. Our house wasn't very large, so we all slept in the same room. It was kind of nice though, because it always felt safe with everyone around. We had our own beds lined up against the walls, and my parents' bed was in the middle. It was cozy and felt like one big sleepover every night. Our nightly routine was pretty simple. After dinner, we would all gather in the living room to watch TV. My siblings and I would play with our toys or draw while my parents relaxed. Around 9 p.m., my mom would start getting us ready for bed. We would brush our teeth, change into our pajamas, and then crawl into our beds. My mom would read us a bedtime story most nights. I always loved this part of the night. Her voice was soothing, and it made me feel calm and ready for sleep. After the story, she would kiss each of us goodnight and turn off the main light, leaving a small nightlight on in the corner of the room. It gave off a soft, warm glow that made the room feel safe. As I lay in my bed, I could hear the gentle breathing of my siblings and the occasional rustle of the blankets. My dad would sometimes snore softly, and it was oddly comforting. It was like a reminder that everyone was there, and everything was okay. I would drift off to sleep feeling secure and happy. One night, I woke up early in the morning. It was still dark outside, but the lamp in the corner of the room was on. I didn't know why it was on, but I didn't think much of it at first. I got out of bed and walked over to turn it off. As I was about to reach for the switch, I glanced towards the living room and froze. There, in the dim light, was a tall shadowy figure. It was just standing there, completely still. My heart started to race, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I quickly turned off the lamp and jumped back into bed, pulling the covers over my head. I lay there, trembling, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. The next morning, I didn't say anything to anyone. I was too scared that they would laugh at me or not believe me. I tried to forget about it, telling myself it was just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew what I saw was real. A few weeks later, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I decided to tell my mom about the shadowy figure. At first, she dismissed it, saying it was probably just a trick of the light or my imagination. But the next day, she asked me to describe exactly what I saw. When I told her, her face went pale. She looked at me with wide eyes and said that she had seen the same thing at the entrance of our bedroom one night. Hearing that sent chills down my spine. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was really there. Days went by, and I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow. Every night, I would lie in bed, staring at the doorway, half expecting to see it again. My sense of safety was shaken. The room that once felt so secure now felt eerie and unsettling. Then one night, my cousin came over to stay with us. He slept in the same room with us, and everything seemed fine. But the next morning, he told me he had seen a shadowy figure in the room during the night. He described it exactly the way I had seen it. My heart pounded in my chest as he spoke. I realized then that whatever it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it was haunting us. The fear lingered, and even though I tried to act brave, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The shadowy figure remained a mystery, and its presence left a lasting mark on my sense of security. One night, I woke up early in the morning, and it was still dark outside. I rubbed my eyes, trying to figure out why I had woken up. As I looked around, I noticed that the lamp in the corner of the room was on. That was strange because we always turned it off before going to bed. I lay there for a moment, feeling a bit confused. The light from the lamp cast long shadows on the walls, making everything look a little eerie. I wondered if maybe one of my siblings had turned it on during the night, but they were all fast asleep. I decided to get up and turn it off myself. I slipped out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone up. As I walked over to the lamp, the floor felt cold under my feet. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of my family. I reached out to turn off the lamp, but something made me stop and look towards the living room. That's when I saw it. A tall shadowy figure was standing in the living room, right by the entrance to our bedroom. It didn't move or make any sound. It just stood there, completely still. My heart started to pound in my chest, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a person? A shadow? My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them made any sense. I was scared, but I couldn't move. It felt like my feet were glued to the floor. I just stood there, staring at the figure. The figure was tall and dark, with no distinguishable features. It almost looked like a person, but something about it was off. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong there. The longer I looked at it, the more scared I became. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Finally, I snapped out of my trance and turned off the lamp as quickly as I could. The room went dark, and I scrambled back to my bed, diving under the covers. I lay there, trembling, my heart still racing. I kept peeking out from under the blanket, half expecting to see the figure coming closer. But nothing happened. The room remained dark and silent. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it was a shadow from something outside, or maybe I was still half asleep and seeing things. I repeated these thoughts over and over, hoping they would make the fear go away. Eventually, I fell back asleep, but it wasn't a restful sleep. I kept having nightmares about the shadowy figure, waking up in a cold sweat multiple times. When morning finally came, I felt exhausted and jittery. I wanted to tell my family about what I had seen, but I was too scared they wouldn't believe me. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the figure. Every time I walked past the living room, I would glance over, half expecting to see it again. The memory of that night stayed with me, making me feel uneasy and scared. I started to dread nighttime, worried that I might see the figure again. It was hard to focus on anything else. My siblings noticed that I was acting different, but I didn't tell them why. I didn't want to scare them, and I still wasn't sure if it was real or just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew that what I saw was real, and that thought scared me more than anything. Finally, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I decided to tell my mom about the shadowy figure, hoping she would understand. When I described what I had seen, her reaction shocked me. She went pale and admitted that she had seen the same thing. That was when I knew for sure that it wasn't just my imagination. For a few days after seeing the shadowy figure, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was always in the back of my mind, making it hard to focus on anything else. I wanted to tell someone about it, but I was scared they wouldn't believe me. Every time I thought about bringing it up, my heart would start to race, and I'd get a lump in my throat. One evening, I finally gathered the courage to tell my mom. We were in the kitchen, and she was cooking dinner. I hesitated for a moment, watching her stir the pot, trying to find the right words. Mom, can I tell you something?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. She looked at me and smiled. Of course, sweetie. What's on your mind?" she said, wiping her hands on a towel. I took a deep breath and started to explain what I had seen that night. I told her about waking up, seeing the lamp on, and then noticing the tall shadowy figure in the living room. At first, she listened patiently, but as I continued, I could see a hint of doubt in her eyes. When I finished, she sighed and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Hey honey, It was probably just a bad dream or your imagination playing tricks on you. Shadows can look strange in the dark, as she said softly. I felt a pang of frustration and disappointment. I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't just a dream. But Mom, it felt so real. I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake, I insisted, my voice trembling. She gave me a reassuring smile and nodded. I know it felt real, but sometimes our minds can make us see things that aren't really there, especially when we're scared or half asleep, as she said. I could tell she was trying to comfort me, but it wasn't helping. I wanted her to believe me, to understand that it wasn't just my imagination. For a moment, I considered dropping the subject, but something inside me pushed me to keep going. Mom, can I describe the figure to you? Maybe it will make more sense, I asked, hoping she would take me seriously. She looked at me curiously and nodded. Sure, go ahead, as she said, leaning against the counter. I took a deep breath and began to describe the figure in detail. I told her how it was tall and dark, with no distinguishable features, and how it just stood there, completely still. As I spoke, I noticed her expression changing. Her face grew pale, and her eyes widened. She looked genuinely scared, and it made my heart race. When I finished, she took a step back and stared at me for a moment, as if trying to process what I had just said. Are you sure that's what you saw? She asked quietly. I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and relief that she was taking me seriously. She took a deep breath and glanced towards the living room, then back at me. I need to tell you something, as she said, her voice trembling. She walked over to the kitchen table and sat down, motioning for me to join her. I sat across from her, my heart pounding. A few weeks ago I saw something too, as she began. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a tall shadowy figure standing at the entrance of our bedroom. It looked exactly like what you described. Her words sent chills down my spine. I wasn't alone. My mom had seen it too. I felt a strange mix of fear and validation. The shadowy figure was real, and it had been haunting both of us. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't want to scare you. I hoped it was just a one-time thing, maybe a trick of the light. But now that you've seen it too, I'm not so sure, as she admitted. We sat there in silence for a while, both trying to make sense of what was happening. From that moment on, I knew I wasn't imagining things. The shadowy figure was real, and it was haunting our home. The fear lingered, and every night, I found myself staring at the entrance of our bedroom, waiting to see if it would appear again. After my mom told me she had seen the same shadowy figure, my fear grew even stronger. Knowing I wasn't alone in this made it real, and that was terrifying. Every night, I found myself thinking about it, wondering if it would come back. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The days passed slowly, and the sense of fear lingered in our house. My mom tried to act normal, but I could tell she was scared too. She would glance nervously at the entrance to our bedroom every now and then, and I knew she was thinking about the shadow. We didn't talk about it much, but the fear was always there, just beneath the surface. I started to notice changes in my behavior. I became more cautious and alert, especially at night. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for any strange sounds. Every creak and groan of the house made my heart race. I kept the covers pulled up to my chin, as if they could somehow protect me. I stopped getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I was too scared of what I might see if I walked through the dark house. Instead, I would lie there, holding it in, waiting for morning to come. It was uncomfortable, but the fear of seeing that shadow again was stronger. My siblings noticed the change in me too. They would ask why I was so quiet, but I didn't know how to explain it to them without scaring them. I just told them I wasn't feeling well. They seemed to accept that, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew something was wrong. My dad tried to reassure us, telling us that there was nothing to be afraid of, that it was just our imaginations. but even he seemed a little uneasy. He started checking the doors and windows more often, making sure everything was locked up tight before we went to bed. It didn't make me feel any safer, though. One night, I heard my mom and dad talking in hushed voices. They were in the kitchen, and I could hear the concern in their tones. They were discussing the shadow, trying to figure out what it could be. My mom suggested it might be a spirit or ghost, while my dad insisted it was just a trick of the light. Listening to them made me feel even more scared and confused. School became a welcome distraction. During the day, surrounded by friends and teachers, I could almost forget about the shadow. But as soon as I got home, the fear would return. I would rush through my homework so I could spend more time with my family in the living room, where it felt safer. One evening, my mom suggested we start sleeping with a nightlight in the hallway. She said it would help us see better if we needed to get up during the night. I knew she was just trying to make us feel safer, but it didn't really help. The shadow had appeared even when the lamp was on, so I didn't think a nightlight would make a difference. Despite my fear, a part of me was also curious. I wanted to understand what the shadow was and why it was haunting us. I started reading books about ghosts and spirits, hoping to find some answers. But the more I read, the more questions I had. Nothing seemed to explain what we were experiencing. As the days turned into weeks, the fear became a constant companion. I found it hard to relax, always on edge, always waiting for the shadow to return. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know what to do. The shadow had taken over my thoughts, my dreams, and my sense of safety. Even though I was scared, I knew I had to be strong for my family. We were all in this together, and we needed to support each other. Every night, as I lay in bed, I would tell myself that I would be okay, that we would figure this out. But deep down, the fear remained, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. One weekend, my cousin came over to stay with us. We were all excited because we loved having sleepovers, and it meant a fun night of games and stories. He was going to sleep in our big bedroom with the rest of us. I tried to push the thoughts of the shadowy figure out of my mind and focus on having a good time. That night, after dinner, we played board games and watched a movie together. It was nice to have something to distract me from the fear that had been haunting me. My cousin didn't know anything about the shadow, and I didn't want to scare him, so I kept quiet about it. We stayed up late, laughing and talking, until my mom told us it was time for bed. As we got ready for bed, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. I hoped nothing strange would happen while my cousin was there. We all settled into our beds, and my mom read us a bedtime story, just like she always did. The night light in the hallway cast a soft glow, and I tried to tell myself everything would be okay. I woke up several times during the night, my heart racing each time I opened my eyes. I kept looking around the room, half expecting to see the shadowy figure. But each time, the room was quiet and still. Eventually, I fell into a restless sleep, hoping the morning would come quickly. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my cousin talking to my mom in the kitchen. He sounded excited and a little scared. I got out of bed and went to see what was going on. As I walked into the kitchen, I heard him say, "Yeah, I saw something in the bedroom last night." My heart skipped a beat. I joined them at the table, and my mom looked at me with concern. "And what did you see?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My cousin turned to me, his eyes wide. "I saw a tall shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room," he said. "It didn't move or make any noise. It was just there." A chill ran down my spine. His description matched exactly what I had seen, and what my mom had seen. I felt a mix of fear and validation. I wasn't imagining things. The shadow was real, and now someone else had seen it too. My mom's face went pale as she listened to my cousin. My cousin continued, "I tried to wake you up, but you were fast asleep. I didn't know what to do, so I just hid under the covers until it went away." He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Do you know what it was?" I shook my head, feeling a knot in my stomach. I don't know, I said quietly. But you're not the only one who's seen it. I saw it too, and so did my mom. My cousin's eyes widened even more, and he looked at my mom for confirmation. She nodded slowly, her face still pale. We all sat there in silence for a moment, trying to process what was happening. My mom finally spoke, her voice trembling. We need to figure out what this is, as she said. It's not just our imaginations. Something is really happening here. The rest of the day felt surreal. We tried to go about our normal activities, but the fear was always there, lurking in the back of our minds. My cousin stayed close to me, clearly shaken by what he had seen. We talked about it in whispers, trying to make sense of the shadowy figure. That night, I felt even more on edge. I kept replaying my cousin's words in my mind, and the fear felt stronger than ever. I didn't want to go to bed, afraid of what I might see. But I knew I had to be brave, for myself and for my family. As we all settled into our beds, I took a deep breath and tried to calm my racing heart. I kept telling myself that we would figure this out, that we would find a way to make the shadow go away. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be easy. The shadow had become a part of our lives, and the fear it brought with it was real and persistent. After my cousin saw the shadowy figure, things changed in our house. The fear that had been just mine and my mom's was now shared by my cousin too. It felt both frightening and a bit comforting to know that we weren't alone in seeing it. But with that comfort came more questions that none of us could answer. Every night, I would lie in bed, thinking about the shadow. Who or what was it? Why was it in our house? Why did it only appear at night? These questions kept swirling in my mind, but there were no answers. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. My mom and I talked about the shadow often, trying to figure out what it wanted. We wondered if it was a ghost, maybe someone who had lived in the house before us. But we had no way of knowing for sure. The uncertainty made everything worse. Not knowing was almost as bad as the shadow itself. The fear never really went away. Even during the day, when the house was filled with sunlight and everything felt normal, there was a lingering sense of unease. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the shadow in every dark corner or reflection. At night, the fear was the worst. I would lie awake for hours, my eyes scanning the room, waiting for the shadow to appear. Every sound made my heart race. Even the soft creak of the house settling felt like a warning. I kept the covers pulled up tight, as if they could somehow protect me. My siblings started to notice my fear too. They asked me why I was acting so strange, but I didn't want to scare them, so I made up excuses. I told them I was just having bad dreams, hoping that would be enough. But I could see the worry in their eyes. My dad tried to reassure us, but even he seemed more cautious. He started leaving lights on in different parts of the house at night. It helped a little, but the fear was still there, lurking in the shadows. The shadowy figure had become a part of our lives, and it felt like it was never going to leave. Despite the fear, I tried to stay hopeful. I hoped that one day we would find out what the shadow was and why it was haunting us. I hoped that we would figure out a way to make it go away, to make our home feel safe again. But each night without answers made that hope harder to hold on to. The encounters with the shadow left a lasting impact on me. I wasn't the same carefree kid I had been before. I was more cautious, more alert. I paid attention to every little detail, always on the lookout for anything unusual. The fear had changed me, and it was something I carried with me all the time. Even now, years later, the memory of the shadowy figure still haunts me. It's something I'll never forget. The fear, the unanswered questions, and the sense of helplessness have stayed with me. I still wonder about the shadow, still think about those nights spent in terror. But I also remind myself that I faced that fear and survived. I learned to be brave in the face of the unknown. And even though the shadow left its mark on me, it also showed me that I could find strength in the darkest of times. I hold on to that strength, hoping it will be enough to keep me safe from whatever shadows the future might hold.